Welcome to this episode of Sentinel Interviews. We're deep in the thick of the 2012 election season, and I'm proud to bring in as our first local candidate for Humboldt County office, running for re-election to the 2nd District seat on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors, Cliff Clendenin. Cliff, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here.
I believe you were our first interview right when we started this whole process back 4 years ago when we were in the back room at Has-Beans Cafe.
Mm-hmm. Sorry to see that venue go away, but nice to be here too, and nice to have this great facility on the Eureka High campus.
Definitely. And this whole place has opened up since you've been elected. A lot of changes since you first joined the Board of Supervisors. Reflect for a bit where you came from, for the folks that weren't around back in '08, why you ran for Board of Supervisors in the first place.
Well, I'm born in Scotia, lived most of my life in Fortuna, other than when I went away to college and traveled a little bit. Got a botany degree from UC Davis, graduated in '75, and traveled a little bit and came back to join the family farm and family business, Clendenin Cider Works. Worked alongside my folks, and then later on my own and with my wife Lori, and raised 2 kids in Fortuna. And as got involved in Fortuna's general plan update as just an engaged citizen, and was on the Farm Bureau Land Use Board, and really got interested in how we could shape policy to move the county forward, have the county thrive, at the same time protect what a great place we've got.
And reflecting for a minute on what you've accomplished on the Board of Supervisors in the last 4 years, what are you most proud of there?
I think overarchingly, we've kept the general plan moving along. It's got about 1 or 2 meetings left at the Planning Commission, and will finally come to our board. So worked hard to assist that process, although that hasn't been in front of our board. We've been actively involved working with staff to see that move along. And we've actually, I think, made some progress in different areas by, at the same time as a really catastrophic budget time. It was the unprecedented recession since the Great Recession has hit private businesses and the economy really hard. And since county government, like all government, lives on the tax revenue that we get from the private sector, we've really been down. It was good planning from previous boards and the county administrative office to have some reserves, but we've consumed those reserves, and through attrition, pared down operations. It's been tough sledding, but happy to see that we're finally getting back to level budgets, and we'll look to assist the private sector in recovery.
So it seems like this supervisor race is, in a strange way, kind of a rematch of what happened 4 years ago. Obviously, things were quite a bit more chaotic with the passing of Roger Rodoni, his wife stepping in his place, and the runoff where there was a write-in candidate. Do you think this time around in 2012, just 2 candidates on the ballot, it's going to give the voters more of a clear-cut choice?
I think they had clear-cut choices last time. It was just 3-way, and then we did that in June, and then again in November. With 2 candidates in the race, this will be decided in the primary. Some people don't feel primaries are important, but this would be, I think, a textbook case of why that is important. So, yeah, we'll just have 1 election this season, and I think there is a clear-cut choice.
And as far as what that clear-cut choice is, it doesn't seem like there's a huge ideological gap or a partisan gap between yourself and Estelle Fennell. It almost seems like it comes down to a regional choice. The 2nd District, even with redistricting, seems to be Fortuna and Rio Dell on one end, and those rural communities around Shelter Cove, Garberville, Redway, Alder Point, and Southern Humboldt. Do you think it's going to come down to hometown loyalties as far as where the voters come out?
That certainly has a play. I mean, it was in evidence last election, and I think is again this time. I think the difference that's really apparent is we have, and I can only speak for myself, but I feel like we want to have good planning that plans for the future, takes into account the demographics coming up, the graying population, and also takes into account new changes in state and federal law, and we know more now. It's widely accepted that we've used the easy half of oil in the world. The science is overwhelming that the burning of those fossil fuels has an effect on the environment. So I think we need to be looking at all those factors where the lack of water in some of our communities is really stark. We've had some great fish runs the last couple of years, combination of factors there, the ocean conditions and river conditions. But we need to have the economy thrive, but we know more about how to take care of the place too. And I think I feel like I represent a good balance of those twin goals. Have the economy thrive, make this a great place to live and raise our kids, and at the same time leave it in really good shape for our kids and grandkids.
So in our previous talk 4 years ago, we definitely touched on economic development. To what extent have the larger forces in the economy simply overwhelmed whatever opportunities or visions that local government had as far as trying to create jobs locally? Where do you think those plans have come out, and what more can be done if indeed we are in an economic recovery?
That big national damper, has affected every sector of the economy and every geographical region. So we're certainly not immune from that. But I believe that plans we've made at the county level, looking to, and these were set in motion classically with the Targets of Opportunity report and the prosperity document, looking at what do existing sectors of the economy need. They need a ready, willing, trained workforce. They need sites to build. They need consistent and understandable regulation, all the things that they need. And I think the work that we've done to, again, county government's not going to create the jobs, but we need to be helping the private sector under the law to thrive and build those jobs. So I think we've built a good foundation of whether it's from the Decade of Difference project at the Humboldt County of Education that we've used Headwaters funds to augment, trying to train that workforce and make sure that kids down in the very primary grades are successful so that they can thrive and then become really strong members of the workforce. Our old economy, where many of my classmates at Fortuna High went to work at Eel River Sawmills or Pacific Lumber Company, that was a really standard choice. You didn't need any education to do that, and that sort of fallback isn't really there anymore. Yes, there's still some timber jobs, and we're going to fight to keep every one of them, but it doesn't have that huge imprint on the economy, at least down in the second district that it once did. So I think the diversification that we've done is, it's helped some, and I think particularly when the economy recovers, we're going to be really well positioned to thrive.
Well, to what extent has Fortuna become somewhat more of a retirement community with the departure of those industries? Mayor Doug Strell of Fortuna told a congressional candidate when they had the debate in Fortuna High School a few weeks ago that, well, when the timber companies left, the folks who worked there tended to pick up and leave themselves, at least if they were middle-aged working families and they had to chase economic opportunity elsewhere. How can we give any hope, how would you give any hope to folks in Fortuna and Rio Dell that they're not simply going to become retirement communities, that there will be other manufacturing opportunities to take the place of the declined timber industry?
We're going to work every angle we can to that effect. We have some small thriving businesses, and we have there's active groups in Fortuna. There's the Fortuna Business Improvement District. All these communities have chambers of commerce, always looking for those opportunities. And the natural aging as I go door to door in the campaign. There's a lot of really elderly people in Fortuna. A lot of people in their 80s and 90s, and a lot of them are doing just great. But it certainly does change the character, and we have a lot of new young families, though, kind of intermixed. So I think as the economy builds, that'll only help retain those families. But certainly the character has changed from basically a big monoculture industry in the lumber industry and nothing else. So I think we're more diversified now, and it's sort of harder to point to a big factory that employs 1,200 people, and there's not those kind of big numbers. But with the graying of the population comes a very strong healthcare industry that we have in Fortuna, centered around the great practitioners we have, and some of the care homes and the Red Memorial Hospital down in Garberville. It's been challenging times, but the healthcare district down there and Gerald Phelps Hospital is on increasingly good footing, and their counterpart Redwoods Rural as well. So economy changes. It's not like doesn't look like our fathers and grandfathers' economy, but I think we need to stay nimble and be ready for new opportunities. In Fortuna, for instance, right across from our apple orchard, there's the 70-acre mill site vacated by, most recently by Pacific Lumber Company. There've been a series of mills there over the years, and there's been a Fortuna veneer plywood mill, other things, but it's a vacant site now. There was a developer ready to come in there in the early 2000s, and I think was focused on a retail development. There'll probably be that component there, but I think people are also looking at, we need to, again, that's a City of Fortuna decision and not primarily a county one, but as an example, I think there are a lot of people looking at what would be the manufacturing or industrial opportunities there, because there is quite an acreage, and those first dollar jobs, whether it's a beef producer or fisheries or light manufacturing or a musical instrument builder, what have you. Those are the first dollars in the economy, and I think those are the ones that are really important to look at. And then then there'll be some retail and other things that will follow that. But that primary job is the one that I think is real key that we always should be looking at.
Well, speaking of diversification, Fortuna and the larger area, we've definitely seen an uptick in the percentage of the population that's Hispanic and Spanish-speaking. Mm-hmm. To what extent can the county embrace these working families and bring them more into the conversation and make them more part of the political process?
That's a good observation and a good point. I think I think already there's more Hispanics registered to vote, and I've known several families that have, mostly in the Oaxacan community, that have either I've worked with or, there's several good Mexican restaurants in town that they have run, and I think they're more and more engaged. Proud to be friends with many of them.
Now the flip side of that, though, is that Fortuna PD and the Humboldt County Sheriff's Office have both been working with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and ICE in some of these raids that have generated some degree of controversy and some degree of real concern amongst that community. And it's even at least alleged that that sort of activity would actually decrease the level of trust between those communities and law enforcement. Folks don't want to report crime because then they'll get caught by immigration. Are you concerned with that involvement of the feds in local law enforcement? That's
certainly a factor, and then and that's just one of the issues where federal involvement sometimes is counterproductive. There, at the federal level, Congress and administration has struggled, over decades with to reform immigration policy. We have some number like 13 million. Illegal folks from Mexico and South America in the United States, and so but there's no real policy to deal with that. I mean, the economy would collapse without them, but they're here illegally. So there's not a good rational policy to deal with that, and I think that just trickles down into what you're reporting, which I'm not aware that there's. I'm aware of the raid at Sun Valley some, I don't know, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, something like that, but wasn't aware of more current activity. But, said again, I've, again, from folks that I've talked to in that community, there's not a trust of authority or law enforcement in Mexico, and at least from the folks I've talked to. So that's just so different up here, where I tend to trust law enforcement. I see them as, and especially my county seat, I see them as just great partners working with us. But even in private life, I've always appreciated the great response we got from Fortuna PD and the Sheriff's Office as well whenever there was an issue. But that culturally, that doesn't come across the border. So I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us to work through that. But the sort of inconsistent and really counter-directional federal presence doesn't help that.
You're watching Sentinel Interviews. My name's Charles Douglas, and I'm here with Humboldt County Supervisor Cliff Clendenin, who's running for a second term representing the 2nd District, which stretches from Fortuna and Rio Dell down to Shelter Cove, Garberville, and the rest of southern Humboldt. Cliff, we were just talking about law enforcement. What about the law enforcement role in the homeless issue? It does seem like there's been a bit of a criminalization of the issue just in terms of what the sheriff's been up to in cooperation, frankly, with the Chamber of Commerce and county officials in the southern Humboldt area, kind of telling them in the Garberville Redway area, well, they're not so welcome if they're not engaged in some sort of productive or economically beneficial activity. Is there some way we can find more common ground and get these folks off the streets, not just to sweep them out of public view, but to get them some sort of help and get them back on their feet?
Mm-hmm. Well, we truly underserve the underserved, and the core of homelessness is they don't have housing. And many of these, there's quite a variety in that group. I think we have somewhere around 35% of the homeless are veterans, and more active presence in southern Humboldt recently from the Veterans Resource Center in Eureka. That's welcome. Certainly challenges our Health and Human Services to try to take our street outreach services down there in the SOS bus and try to find these communities and help them. In terms of the interaction of our Sheriff's Department and the Chamber of Commerce, maybe casting that as versus the homeless, that's a difficult one. It's not illegal to be poor. It's not illegal to be homeless. Those folks have First Amendment rights that we absolutely need to protect. But we need to balance that against, can they destroy property in front of a business? Absolutely not. Can they disrupt the rights of way or the public thoroughfares? No, that's not okay. So we need to, protect the rights of the homeless, but at the same time, I think we need to, insist on a level behavior that we insist on from all our citizens.
Since there is no municipal, city government in Garberville Redway area, although some folks are talking about that, to what extent then can the county spend some admittedly limited public resources to get a public bathroom, a public shower, those sort of basic facilities going in the southern Humboldt area?
And that's there's an active group working on that. I think this first kind of surfaced with the Jim DeMulling Park, which is actually just a little road right away on the north end of Garberville.
I think that's where the bus stops.
What's that?
I think it's where the bus stops, though.
And actually, the main bus stop is at the. They might do a small one there. The main bus stop is in the south end of town, but on the north end of town. There was an individual that just put a porta potty there. Well, you can't do that. It's like we need an agreement. It's county property, and so we're in active discussions with those both through my office and then Public Works with folks wanting to find an area to locate a bathroom in Garberville, a public bathroom, and I'm in favor of if we can find the right site that's not disruptive to someone's business or living conditions, but have a permanent bathroom like at Fields Landing or some of our county parks like AWA, versus a porta potty. Have a facility that's that's clean and strongly built and all the things that a public bathroom needs. That being said, identifying funds for that is a challenge. I think they were able to use, through Jimmy Smith's help, boating and waterways funds for the one at Fields Landing. there's not just a sitting there available pool of money to use for something like that. And then the ongoing operation and maintenance is a significant challenge. Even the bathrooms in the city of Eureka has behind the gazebo. That's an ongoing challenge, and there's an article recently written about that. So anyway, I've been in active discussions with both the groups favoring putting in a restroom facility, and then some conversations with the chamber, Garberville Chamber as well, and had Public Works folks down there. And basically what we've said is, we're here to assist a community decision in Southern Humboldt, but we're not going to issue an edict and, ensconce one group or another as, having control of this idea. So, there's a very active political conversation on many topics in Southern Humboldt, and certainly this one is one. But I think eventually we'll get there with enough engagement and hard work.
On the other end of the county, still staying on law enforcement, this whole county ordinance regarding the uses of the courthouse property. I think we've seen some chilling effect on folks that it wasn't intended to affect. The Tea Party had their tax day thing, and there they were lined up with their flags, but they're stuck lining the sidewalk outside of this big fence that's still there. The grass has grown back. Why is the fence still there?
I see the fence going away, and I was part of the 4-1 vote that said, no, we need a little more regulation here. We're allowed to, as any jurisdiction, to dictate time, place, and manner of First Amendment expression. And so we've allowed that to, any kind of protest can go on between 6 in the morning and 9:30 at night. Sure, it's arbitrary. We're going to refine that when the county administrative office has a chance to get around to all the groups that have as a legacy, have used the courthouse, and then we can, see what we like and don't like about the ordinance as it exists right now. It needs to be a free and open space for the people that are there wanting to protest, but it needs to be a free and open space for, anybody else of any description that wants to either do their own protest or use the facilities in any way they choose.
With all these law enforcement issues, it seems to come back to an issue that it seemed like had been resolved with the creation of the Law Enforcement Liaison Committee, a citizen police oversight, essentially, even if just in an advisory way. The board approved going ahead and doing that, and then hasn't appointed anyone to the committee. It's just sort of sitting there on the books.
And that's an accurate description. I was one of the ones that voted to form that. That was not a unanimous vote of the previous board, but and this will work. I felt very positive about how this could really assist law enforcement, but it's not to be second guessing them or looking over their shoulders. I think it's educational in both ways. They'll be able to, I think, frankly, help law enforcement make better decisions, and they're also going to have their back. They'll certainly be the ones to cry foul if law enforcement were to step out of line. But I think our sheriff's folks in particular do, a fine job in a underfunded, difficult environment, and I think it's fine.
Again, you're watching Sentinel Interviews. This is Charles Douglas with Cliff Clendenin. One last question: general plan update process. Looks like we're finally getting to the end of it. For folks out there who don't know what a general plan is, what has been your role in trying to shepherd this process through, and what is it going to mean for Humboldt County's future?
Okay, the general plan is it's a blueprint for how you go forward in your community, and what are you going to look like? And it's a 20-year plan. We've had a lot of input. It's fallen in roughly in a hybrid of Plan A and Plan B, but with some Plan C thrown in. I think the planning commissioners, over a 3-year run at the planning commission, spanning, I believe, 12 or 14 planning commissioners. There's 7 on the commission, but there's that many. A lot of really good input from farmers, ranchers, environmentalists, realtors, tax people. There's just been a lot of great input in that process, and I think they've in large got a really solid document. So I'm looking forward to seeing that through. We'll certainly have some public process as it comes in front of our board on some of the thornier issues, like for instance, should housing be required to be associated with timber harvesting if the housing is going to be located in timberland, and to what degree. That came as a 3-3 vote from the Planning Commission. So those split votes and controversial pieces in particular will in fact, the entire document, but I'm sure we'll be focusing more on these more difficult issues. But I think we've got, the Planning Commission has done a great job, and staff and the public, all the people that invested just, literally thousands of hours in over 200 meetings into that. You are going to have people, though, at the 11th hour saying, the process is wrong. This is a process that was set in motion years ago by previous boards, and I think it's been, public process is never perfect. It's never completely clean. There's always somebody that maybe didn't quite get what they wanted out of there. But there's forces in the community that want to derail this and start over or do something completely different. And I would not be in favor of that. I feel like we've got a solid document, but I look forward to hearing the input as it comes to us, comes in front of us starting this summer, and I look forward to moving this through.
One quick postscript, since we have the time. A lot of money flying around this election, yourself and perhaps more so from your opponent. It does seem like campaign finance has been something the candidates have talked about, but once they're in office, they don't do much about. Do you see campaign finance reform putting a campaign contribution cap in at $500,000, $750,000? A lot of different numbers have been thrown around, but do you think the supervisors do need to do something to control the cost of county elections?
I think nationwide it's a problem. You look at the super PACs at the presidential level, and it's unprecedented the amount of money spent. I can just speak for my own campaign. I'm certainly actively fundraising and campaigning at the same time. It's if you're not going to fundraise, you're not going to get your message out there. So I think it is important to reach people. The quantity of money is pretty daunting, and yeah, I think it would be nice. No, I haven't done anything personally to push that through at the Board of Supervisors level, but I think I'm modeling in my own campaign a balanced course of action of working with all kinds of people and getting donations from a variety of people, and not from any particular block or organized group, and it feels democratic, like I feel like it should represent the job.
Again, this has been Sentinel Interviews. I'm here with Humboldt County Supervisor Cliff Clendenin. Cliff, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate it.
Welcome to this episode of Sentinel Interviews, here at the Community Media Center studios on the Eureka High School campus, right here with Estelle Fennell, candidate once more for the 2nd District seat on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. Estelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Charles.
So before we get into the mechanics of the race and the issues facing the voters coming this June election, maybe let folks who weren't in the loop the last electoral cycle know a little bit about yourself and why you're running.
Okay, well, for those who are not aware of who I am Estelle Fennell. I live in the Redway area. I have been in this area for the last 30 years. For 17 and a half of those years, I was the news director at KMUD Radio. After that, I actually ran for this seat in 2008 against Roger Rodoni and Cliff Clendenin. Tragically, Roger lost his life in a car accident right before the June primary, and then in the runoff, his wife Johanna ran, so it was a three-way race again in November, and Cliff won at that time. After that election, I was recruited by the Humboldt Coalition for Property Rights and became their executive director up until the end of last year or so. I can't remember exactly, but. And then I launched this race, this campaign for supervisor. The reason I'm running is I've given Cliff some time, and I just don't think he's done enough for the 2nd District. I feel very strongly that the 2nd District needs a strong leader, effective, representative, who returns people's calls, is there for people, works with them, and puts the 2nd District first. There are a lot of issues that differentiate me from Mr. Clendenin, but the bottom line is I think we really need a strong representative for the 2nd District, which is why I'm running. I think I can do that job.
Now, let the voters know what motivated you really to get in politics in the first place. Obviously, Coalition for Property Rights is really pushing for relaxing of government regulations on private property holders. Is it those sort of regulatory issues that's motivating you, or, given your background in media as well as in political activism, what is it that drives you to want to seek this seat?
Well, let me just correct a statement you said about Hum CPR. From my perspective and my involvement with Hum CPR, what I can say is that it's not so much about relaxing regulations, it's making sure that we don't have more regulations that take away people's property rights put in place. So it's more about, and it's not even that, it's also about generally making sure that our general plan, our land use issues are crafted with the input from people that they affect. So it's all about public participation. And in fact, if you want to, that's pretty much the core of why I feel that I would be a good representative, because that is something that I hold very dear, as you referred to in my background in journalism. To empower people, to inform and to empower people. I think that my involvement with the community as a whole, I'm on several boards, the Bryceland Volunteer Fire Department, the Healy Senior Center, the Lighthouse Preservation Society. I'm on the KEE-TV CAB Citizens Board. I'm on the Citizens Advisory Board. I'm involved, I'm on the board of the Mainstream Media Project. All that is a way for me to be involved in my community and to give what I can back to the community. I feel very strongly that our community in the 2nd District needs strong representation, and so that's why I'm running. It's really the core part of my campaign, and it will be the core of myself as a supervisor, is being a responsive, strong advocate for the 2nd District, for the people of the 2nd District and their issues.
Now, given the somewhat confused nature of the last go-around for the 2nd District back in 2008.
It was a tough one, yeah.
So the incumbent passed away, his wife stepped in the race, the runoff system was confusing enough where there was a writing candidacy, so it all got pretty jumbled. In this case, one-on-one, over on June 5th. Yes. Do you think that's going to give the voters a clearer choice?
Absolutely. I think it's a very clear choice for the voters. And it's also a wonderful thing that we don't have to worry about going on into November, raising more funds, because as you know, that's a part of running an election. Just generally making, it's an arduous process to be elected. Most people do have to go through I've been through them, and I'm very, very happy to just be doing it in one shot. It gives you the possibility to really get that energy out there and keep it focused right to that very end.
You mentioned the campaign finance, and fundraising is always a big part of these campaigns. I already had asked Cliff, because he had said some statements generally favorable towards campaign finance reform, maybe not public financing, but at least some sort of campaign contribution limits. We haven't seen any of the supervisors really step forward and put that in the hopper as an agenda item, despite their verbal support for those ideas. Whatever the numbers being thrown around, 500, 750, 1,000, but some sort of limit on the individual contributions to local candidates, it seems to pass constitutional muster. Is that something you would actually do?
I would, if it's something that the other supervisors are on board with, and everybody's made statements to that effect. I don't see any reason to not support it. You know, the bottom line here is, I think, speaking with the media right now, the bottom line is it's the media that puts the price up. You know, now we have to get our message out. In other countries, it's free to get your message out. It doesn't cost. In this country, free enterprise, it costs a lot. And, you know, so how do you regulate that? You can't. And so I see the issues that people have. I don't like it at all. I would much prefer that we could just have situations like this where we sit down and we discuss the issues and let the voters know where the candidates stand. So yeah, that's my answer on that.
And as far as the sources of the money for these elections, it does seem like there is a group of local well-heeled interests, for lack of a better term, who are giving money to both your campaign and to Rex Bone's campaign in the 1st District, and even to Karen Brooks's campaign in the 3rd District. Do you think there's a confluence of interest going on there? And do you think these donors are having an influence over the course of the election and of the course of where the supervisors stand if elected?
No. Personally, no. Definitely speaking for myself, no. My campaign contributions are robust, and I'm very happy to have them. There are some people who have donated to me who've also donated to the other candidates, but I'm not going to talk about their races. I'm going to talk about mine.
Of course.
And bottom line is what the reason people are supporting me is that they've seen me in action. They've seen me speak out for property rights, and they've seen me speak out for access to government, for transparency at the supervisorial level and at all levels of government. They've seen me speak out about lawsuits that I don't favor, that the county is pursuing. And so, generally speaking, there will be some crossover. But if you look at my campaign, you'll see a lot of different, lots and lots of different contributions, and some you won't see because they don't get reported on the 460s. You know, anything under $100 is just lumped together. Not really. I mean, we keep tabs on it, but it's not reported out to the public. And there are a lot of those. We have lots and lots of donations, anything from $10 and on up. And we have some fairly significantly generous donations. And what I see there also is people giving according to their means, you know, and I appreciate that. I really do. I appreciate it from the person who gives me $10 or the person who gives me $500. None of them can expect any better, more special treatment. They will all get fair representation from me. And I think that's why people feel confident enough to back my campaign.
Again, you're watching Sentinel Interviews. I'm Charles Douglas here with Humboldt County Supervisor candidate Estelle Fennell, running in the 2nd District. Now that 2nd District, the lines were redrawn a little bit in this last round after the census kind of cut out some of the Avenue of the Giants area, but in general the district stayed wholly intact. It's Fortuna and Rio Dell north end, and it's the rural communities in southern Humboldt on the other end. We have 2 candidates who are from opposing ends of the district. How much do you think geography is going to play a role here?
Well, geography obviously will play a role, but I think that what you're going to find is that the 2nd District has, the residents of all sides of the 2nd District have a lot in common. So yes, of course, people who've known me for a long time and know my contribution to the community would be people who live closer to me. But I've been spending a lot of time in the other parts of the district as well, and people are very receptive to my message. So I think that the determining factor in this election will be the clear choice between me and Cliff Clendenin. What I stand for, what he stands for, what I have done, what he's done, et cetera, et cetera. So geography does play a part, of course, but overall I think this will be this will be a test of where people sit on the issues or stand on the issues.
Well, touching on some of those property rights issues, the general plan, a lot of folks in the general public don't really know what it means and how it's going to impact their lives. For folks who aren't worried so much about their property being rezoned or having its land use designation changed, don't even know what a land use designation is. They don't even own property, they rent, like a lot of us. What does the general plan really mean for the future of Humboldt County, and why do you feel that process has gone off the rails, if it has?
Well, it has gone off the rails, or at least it has teetered along the edges for sure. And that's a big question, as you well know, I'm sure, Charles, because you've been to a lot of those meetings. The bottom line here is that the general plan is akin to the Constitution, if you will, for the county. And I think that for people who own land, it's extremely important issue because it regulates land use issues. But for people who don't own land, it also regulates infrastructure. It regulates water use. And in this particular general plan, which is more of a rewrite than an update, there are several new elements coming in, and one of them deals with telecommunications, which I think is really good. So it is basically the set of regulations around which our county operates. And so it's very important for people. And as far as how it's been run, I'm very concerned, have been concerned all along by the level of public participation. And you know, you'll hear people who defend the process saying we've had hundreds and hundreds of meetings, but the quality of those meetings and what they, how they were conducted is problematic to me. And a very key issue is a section of the general plan called Section 1500, which I've heard referred to as basically the Bill of Rights within the Constitution. And that deals with public participation in the process. The staff, when they made proposals to the Planning Commission, deleted Section 1500 out of the general plan. And I fought very hard with a group, an ad hoc group, called ourselves the Public Participation Working Group. We went back in to the framework plan, looked through it, brought out all the components of Section 1500 and reintroduced them into the new plan. And that was no small task because you're now matching goals with standards with implementation measures, and now we're getting into the weeds, which probably most of the listeners don't want to hear. But bottom line, the Section 1500 is about access to the process. And a lot of the local citizens in the 2nd District, including the City of Fortuna, the City of Rio Dell, the Garberville Chamber of Commerce, the Fortuna Chamber of Commerce, almost everybody, every elected body in the 2nd District petitioned the supervisors to install citizen or community advisory committees into the general plan, to reinsert them in there. And I was very disappointed once again with my opponent's take on that. He seemed to veer towards the staff recommendation, and he has spoken, I don't know if he said this to you, but he's on the record as saying that he sees those sort of like a barrier to democracy, and I think the dead opposite is true.
Shifting gears for a bit, going to some public safety and law enforcement issues. Public participation was certainly an issue with the recent emergency or urgency ordinance regarding uses of the area in front of the Humboldt County Courthouse. There was a long-term process with the county administrative officer underway to consult with Human Rights Commission, law enforcement, various other groups, to craft an ordinance that would include everybody's concerns. And then all of a sudden, it's an emergency, even though it's been going on 6, 7, 8 months now. And they put this ordinance through with one meeting on a 4-to-1 vote, and they had to get 4 votes because it was an emergency ordinance under an obscure section of government code. Did you feel that process short-circuited public participation? Would you have done something differently with that urgency ordinance and with that issue?
I don't agree that there was a need for an urgency ordinance. I feel that there were enough laws on the books. There are enough laws on the books to deal with any issues regarding defecation in public and all of those kinds of things that were a real and are a real problem for the people who are having to access that building every day, you know, yourself included, you know, going to work, attending meetings. It is a bit problematic. However, I think there are enough laws on the books to deal with the problem areas, and I disagreed with an aspect of that urgency ordinance that put further restrictions on free speech by creating a curfew between 9:30 and 6 a.m., I think. And of course, immediately after that, the Veterans for Peace went up and had a protest because of that very issue, and people went to jail, and there may be a lawsuit, and I just think it's too big of a response to an issue that could have been handled right there with the existing one. Now, as far as the process goes, to create an ordinance, I will always push for and promote the greatest extent possible of public participation, and I don't think we need to rush into it. It's you know, the idea of making an urgency out of this kind of makes me think. I've covered a lot of emergencies. Sorry for hitting the microphone. I've covered a lot of emergencies, real emergencies, earthquakes, fires, floods. This is not an emergency. It's very unpleasant, very difficult situation, but I think it could be handled with strong leadership.
Now, in terms of another issue that some people consider an emergency or at least an urgent situation is the issue of homelessness down there in southern Humboldt. And we've seen the supervisor for that district, along with the sheriff, along with the Chamber of Commerce in Garberville, kind of team up to essentially round people up and shove them away from the business district there in Garberville. There's even been homeless veterans who are basically told they shouldn't be hanging out in the Veterans Park there. To what extent do you think Humboldt County can be working in a more constructive role in terms of not just getting the homeless out of sight, but in trying to cure the issue and trying to get folks the services they need?
I think that the situation in Garberville and Redway is very similar to the situations all over the nation right now. Everybody's dealing with one form or another of this kind of imposition, or wouldn't say imposition, a problem in the community. And I was very proud of the Garberville-Redway area for getting the merchants and business people, local townsfolk together with people who are advocating for the homeless and people advocating for the vagrants too, actually. And I thought we were beginning a good dialogue. I think that dialogue can be continued with a little bit of strong leadership once again, and I would be very happy to facilitate that dialogue. I think that the bottom line here is, as I've said at meetings that I've gone to on this issue, there's a difference between being compassionate and enabling bad behavior. And again, you had the situation just like you had at the courthouse where people are defecating people's doorsteps and their flower beds, et cetera, and some incidents of violence. At the meetings, the town meetings, one of the facilitators noted that a lot of the people who were concerned were women because they were somehow feeling unsafe walking around the town certain times of day and night. So I think that the way you solve a problem like that, especially in a small town, is you get together and you create town values, if you will, and you say, this kind of, we all agree that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. We're not kicking you out, but we don't like it and we don't appreciate it that you disrespect us and then expect us to take care of you too. You know, I mean, so I think that a couple of the dialogues were good. One broke up when there was somebody there from outside of the area, came down from Eureka, and was fomenting people, talking about rights. And here you had people who were actually starting to talk to each other, and it devolved into a shouting match. And, you know, that's when it kind of fizzled out. And I would hope that it would come back. Now, there are a couple of groups that are meeting, looking at possible solutions. But again, it's all about the community working together, you know, and you have to inspire people to talk to each other, not point fingers at each other.
Now, is one of those possible solutions public restrooms like we have in Eureka and now Arcata's talking about, or public showers that Eureka has set up, admittedly through a private charity that seems to be working all right? Just last night I was at an event where John Schultzer, formerly of North Coast Resource Center, now of New Directions, was talking about, well, if you engage the homeless community, they will keep those facilities clean themselves. It's not going to cost the government a ton of money.
Well, actually, John Shelter was scheduled to come down to one of those meetings, and he wasn't available that time, so I'm not sure if he's going to come and help with the dialogue in Southern Humboldt, but I think that would be helpful for sure.
And can we really accept as a reasonable answer that, well, we'd love to have a public restroom in Garberville, but we just can't afford it?
That is reasonable. That is a reasonable answer. However, if the community wants it, maybe the funds can be created. But one thing I know, there is a move. The first thing was having porta potties. Well, there have been porta potties put out several times in past years, and they've just been completely demolished and just really badly treated. And you know, the arguments are that these are there for not just for people who are quote unquote vagrants, but tourists. Well, I'm not going to see any tourists taking advantage of a porta potty that looks and the way those did. So there's the argument to put in a nice bathroom that's well maintained, and you know, you have to think of things like using stainless steel instead of glass for the mirrors and that, because somehow or other people take out their aggression a lot in these facilities, and it costs money. Garberville is an unincorporated area. We don't have any system for funding these kind of projects, so it'd be interesting to see how we could come up with a solution if we can.
Again, you're watching Sentinel Interviews. I'm Charles Douglas here with Estelle Fennell. Just want to throw in a quick question. We were talking about public safety and law enforcement issues. The Board of Supervisors did vote to create a law enforcement liaison committee, not quite a full-fledged police review system, but at least an advisory committee to get that dialogue going between the public and law enforcement. So the supervisors created this committee, then they never appointed anyone to it, and it just sits there on the books. Would you see that committee implemented? Would you actually put second district representatives on that committee?
Well, first of all, I'd want to have a look at it. I have to admit that I'm not 100% familiar on exactly what they came up with as a model. So if it does come up again, I'd like to look at it. I'd like to talk with everybody involved, with the law enforcement, with the community groups. As you said, maximum participation to create the best model possible, if that's something that's required and needed in our community.
And one final question, since I did raise it with Mr. Glendenin, was in Fortuna, we have a growing Latino community, and we also have both the Fortuna Police and a Sheriff's Department that is cooperating with these immigration and customer enforcement actions, secure communities and these immigration raids and so forth. Is there a way that the county and law enforcement can play more of a role of trying to bring these folks, Spanish-speaking or otherwise, into the community and into the political dialogue, into our political process?
Well, that's a very good question. Actually, I was walking door to door yesterday or the day before. I can't remember exactly which town I was in. I've been in a few in the last few days. I think it might have been in Hydesville the other day. And I went to a home, and there was a Spanish-speaking woman there. She's a registered voter. That's why I was at her home. And she didn't speak any English. And that's a barrier to participation in some regard. I think that what we need to do to enable all kinds of participation is to bring people in and bring people to the table. If there are ways to get them involved, I definitely want to see that. I mean, after all, if this woman has the right and the ability to vote for me, I want her to hear my message and to understand it. And I can speak a little Italian, but I don't speak Spanish. I had somebody with me who does, so we were able to communicate. But you know, that does create a bit of a barrier. And it's interesting because she has to rely on her son, who does speak English, but doesn't live with her, to help her through those things that she's got to deal with on a day-to-day basis. That's just within the family alone. She needs help.
Again, you've been watching Sentinel Interviews. Estelle Fennell and Cliff Clendenin are your candidates in the 2nd District of Humboldt County. The election is on June 5th. Estelle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Charles.
Enjoy your guys' circle jerk.
So were you told you couldn't let your children play?
Yeah, gave me a ticket to boot. I don't know what. I've